Hello and welcome to the OKPreps Extra Show. I'm Patrick Prince, joined as always by Barry Lewis. We're talking 2 days before Christmas. Barry, your Christmas shopping done?
Almost. Somehow it got done. But yeah, looking forward to Christmas. And of course, if it's Christmas week, it's Tournament of Champions week at the
That's right.
BOK
That's right.
Center. So that really is even though the basketball season's been going on for about a month, it's sort of like, for me, an unofficial start to the season because I've seen a couple games, a few games, but to me, the season really gets started with the tournament champions. Just like some people say, even though there was the NBA Cup, that Christmas Day is really the kickoff or the tip off for the NBA season when it starts to really get serious.
It really is. And if they were smart, they would start their season on Christmas Day. Like, remember when they did that in COVID and it worked and everybody seemed to kind of like it? Was it the COVID year that they started
Well,
on
they did
Christmas
it
Day?
when they had the labor stoppage.
Okay.
In fact, that was the year when the Thunder went to the finals.
Okay. Well, I know like Charles Barkley and some others are really starting to kind of bang the drum, but the NBA should start on Christmas Day. That's a podcast for another day. Um, why don't, before we get into it, we're going to do something kind of fun today. I'm kind of excited about it. We're going to pick Barry Lewis's brain for his top football games of the 2024 season. This man watches a lot of football, seen a lot of great stuff. So we're going to pick his brain a little bit and see what he thought was the most memorable. But before we get into that, Barry, let's do a little PSA here. You are in the midst of picking all world and all state teams. Why don't you kind of take it away and tell the folks what they need to know as far as nominations go?
Yes, we've tried to send out nomination forms or reach out through email to coaches in football or volleyball, softball, cross country. But if you've not heard from myself or from Ben Johnson, who's doing the sports besides football, then send me an email at Barry, Barry dot Lewis, Lewis, at tulsaworld.com. And because we want to make sure all the coaches have a chance to submit their nominations, already have received a lot of nominations. Uh, so just keep those nominations coming from those, or yeah, urge those who have received a form but have not sent it back in football to please send it to me as soon as you can. So I know it's a busy season, but again, appreciate all the coaches who've already responded.
Before we get into your top games, Barry, any update on the Wagner coaching situation? Thankfully the week got a little quieter for you, and most of the big schools now have coaches. But of course, Dale Condit went to Muskogee, so Muskogee now has their coach, which leaves Wagner looking for another coach. Anything new on that?
The only Mike Case reported in Monday's Tulsa World that looks like he talked to the Wagner superintendent, and they've gotten some good applications in already for the job. Obviously, that you would think that that job would draw a lot of interest. Dale Condit really made that a great job now, a lot better than when he took it over 20 years ago. So some of the names that have been mentioned, don't know if they're interested, or a couple of his former players from about 10 to 15 years ago. Wow, probably more like 13 to 15 years ago. Time flies. Prince McJunkins and Kevin Peterson. Of course, Kevin Peterson wound up playing in the NFL a little bit. So in so those are two names to watch to see if they're interested. And or it could be, as happens in so many of these instances, it's a name like totally out of left field. So you never know. But Wagner, I don't think they feel an urgency to get it done, but there's no need to, like a lot of the schools felt the need to get it done before Christmas break. Well, that's not going to happen. But Wagner wants to get it done in time for the regularly scheduled January 14th board meeting. But if they don't feel they have the right person by then, they can always do like what most of these other schools have done, is call a special board meeting to make the hiring official later in the month. But they definitely do want to get it done before the end of January.
Before we get into your games of the year, Barry, was there like an overriding theme of this season?
Well, it was at least I remember about week 7, 8, 9, around those times, I kept on thinking, wow, compared to last year, I haven't seen any exciting games. This is rather it's sort of been a calm season. And then all of a sudden, all the craziness broke out in the last few weeks of the season, starting late November and then carrying on into December. It was crazy off the field with all the head coaching moves. That was amazing. But it was also feeding into the craziness was everything that happened on the field in the football playoffs. Who would have ever imagined 4 1-point games out of the 6 that were played on the first championship weekend? That's just incredible. And so that was just all a part of what made about a 3-week period starting in late November. It was really the last week of November and then carrying on to the first 2 or 3 weeks of December, the craziest 3 or 4 week span I've ever experienced in 40 years of covering sports at Tulsa newspapers.
All right. Well, let's get into it. Your top game of the year. Take it away.
It would probably no surprise to anyone.
No surprise.
It would be the 6A1 championship game, Bixby beating Owasso 43-42 in overtime. Just had everything you'd want from a game. We've documented it pretty well. We hope everyone had a chance to look at my inside look, our behind the scenes look with Lauren Montgomery at a Q&A with him. That was in Sunday's Tulsa World. If you haven't seen it, check it out. And then we ran the big championship commemorative page for Bixby's for that game that people can buy prints of at the Tulsa World store.com store. And so online, those make great Christmas gifts. Anyway, you had everything you'd want from a game, high quality of play, dramatic ending, coaching decisions that will be talked a lot forever. Just an amazing night. But the week before that, it was a game that was almost as amazing. It was Owasso was on the other end of that in the semifinals when they beat Jenks 30-27 in 3 overtimes. That was an incredible game too, on just a picture perfect weather-wise fall day. I think that added to it too, that this was just like, if you want, perfect weather, great game. What more could you ask for? High drama, Jenks and Owasso. And it had quite the dramatic ending too. So back-to-back weeks, blockbuster games like that in 6A1, that was amazing.
Well, and Jenks Owasso, played in front of an overflow crowd at Claremore. I thought that kind of added to it.
Oh, very much so. And it was just, again, if you want to give people an example of what Oklahoma high school football is all about, let them check out the videos of these 2 games. What a great advertisement for Oklahoma high school football. I would say Friday Night Lights, but there weren't any lights on in the day game in the semifinals. But the season ended with a bang.
Okay, let's continue. For your next game, we're gonna drop down a few classes. What's next on your list?
Probably, those 2 games are so definitive, but there were some other exciting games. Obviously, Lincoln Christians on the Thursday night game on state championship week, or at least the first state championship week, is getting a reputation of some really crazy things happening in the 3 years they've done that. And this followed along those lines where Lincoln Christian beats Sulphur 28-27. It looks like Lincoln Christian is going to let the game slip away. Sulphur's rallying, and they go for 2 instead of the tying extra point with a little over a minute to go. And Lincoln Christian somehow comes up with a stop. And then there was some craziness after that with a victory formation fumble. And it was just a weird game, but Lincoln Christian comes out with the win over Sulphur. And Lincoln Christian dominated pretty much all its games all season. And some people say, well, it's just 3A. But Lincoln Christian showed earlier in the year that they can play with teams that higher levels. They dominated Shiloh Christian, and Hudson Ball's return to the Tulsa area, 38-14. And Shiloh Christian went on to become the runner-up in 6A Arkansas football. And Hudson Ball had an awesome season. And of course, we'll be seeing him playing for the University of Tulsa.
Yeah.
So Lincoln Christian, it just makes you wonder, though, what would have happened, how everything would have played out if, as originally planned, Lincoln Christian was going to be in 4A. Remember back before all the craziness, court rulings of the spring, that Lincoln Christian and some other teams like Heritage Hall, where they were supposed to be in 4A this year. But a court ruling sent Lincoln Christian, in effect, back to 3A, and they were just such a dominant team.
I say we, Barry, a lot on this show, and usually when I say that, I'm not referring to you because you are so immersed in this, and there's not a whole lot that goes on in football in this area that you don't know about or appreciate. So I'll say the we is the general we. Do we give Lincoln Christian enough credit generally for the program they have built and for the success they have had? I feel like maybe it is because they're 3A. I don't know, but it seems like we overlooked them. Again, we, not saying you, overlooked them a little bit because teams like Bixby and Jenks and the Wassos of the world kind of dominate the scene a little bit. Do we give Lincoln Christian enough credit?
Probably not. When you look at they've lost like only one regular season game in the last 6 years. It's really crazy, incredible success they've had there, and they've been having it for a long time. So for ever since they really started the program 22, 23 seasons ago, they've only had 2 head coaches in their history. There's a lot to be said for that continuity, and they face their share of adversity. It seems like every spring they lose their leading receiver that's coming back to a 6A1 school. And so instead of like moaning and having a pity party, they just move forward and keep going. It's really remarkable.
Who was their quarterback that went to Florida a couple years ago?
Max Brown?
But he left Florida, right?
He left Florida.
Where's he now?
Well, with the transfer portal, you never know. He was at Charlotte this past season.
Okay. Did he play much?
He played some. Again, I will apologize for not following all the comings and goings of all the transfer portal people. But Max Brown, what a quarterback that he was, and he and it's really ironic that they did not win as good as he was, and he was really, really good. They did not win a state championship with him as quarterback. He got to the championship game with him as quarterback, but he was really, really good.
Okay, so next on the list, Barry, is a couple of games involving West Side teams where they came over to this side of the state and had a couple of pretty impressive wins. Won't you take it from there?
Yes, week 10 was very memorable in the regular season finales when Norman came over and pretty well dominated Bixby. That was a shocker, 31-20. And it came the night after Edmond Memorial came over to the Tulsa area and beat Union. So to have that on back-to-back nights in the final week of the regular season, and especially Edmond Memorial Union game, was for a first round bye and to get to host a quarterfinal. That was a huge game. And that was a game that's like Union in that situation previously. Union never loses that type of game. Mm-hmm. But Edmond Memorial, they had a heck of a season. They found a way. They rallied and came away with the W. And to have like the next night, Norman in a game where it wasn't quite as clear cut, but it was sort of like 2 years previous where there was there was a tiebreaker situation where Norman could have won the district, but it was likely Bixby would still win on the tiebreaker. But you just didn't expect to see Norman dominate Bixby like that, but they did. And Bixby did. In the end, the result of the game did not matter. But it was just stunning to see that. But just like 2 years ago, Bixby used that to get back on track and play its best football. in the playoffs. But still, it could be a preview of things to come. That although, as has been the case for almost 30 years now, 29 seasons, where the state's largest classification has been won by a Tulsa area team, this could be a preview of things to come, that the West did make strides this year. It shows that they could be a major player. However, that's what makes all these recent coaching moves all the more interesting. And there was such an urgency because I think the schools around here know that, and they've got to raise their game too.
Also on your list is the Backyard Bowl. No shock there. That's usually a pretty good game. Your thoughts there?
Well, the game, for the most part, wasn't that great this year, unless you just love games with no scoring. Virtually no scoring. The final was 9-3. But it was quite a memorable finish. It will go in there as one of those crazy, controversial, memorable finishes. We'll give it that. The fact that was Sam Stone's, was it a catch or no catch? With about 3 minutes to go at the Union 1 yard line on a 4th down pass. The head of the officials, the Greater Tulsa Officials Association, said that the officials got it right. It was no catch. It's just one of those plays that, and I'll say this at the college and pro level, you see it and it looks like a catch. Common sense says it's a catch, but I guess the way that the rules are written up, it's not a catch. Be that as it may, because that's what it's sort of like Bill Buckner in the 1986 World Series in Game 6. People say Bill Buckner lost the World Series for the Red Sox. No, that didn't help when he muffed the ground ball, but he did not lose the World Series. The game was already tied, and that was just Game 6, and the Red Sox had the lead in Game 7 and blew it. So it's not so cut and dry. And just even if Sam Stone's play would have been ruled a catch, Jenks still could have won the game. Even if Jenks scores from the 1 yard line, then there's still 2.5 minutes left. In the previous 2 weeks, Shaker Isaac had led Union on last minute drives to send the game into overtime for Union. So there would have still been a long ways to go, even if he makes the catch. And Jenks did get the ball in really good field position with over a minute left. And so Jenks had its chance again to win the game. And, in the Backyard Bowl, all the crazy things that happened in the last minute, and Jenks, Owen Jones, threw one of his rare interceptions this year to a former teammate, Jackson Franklin, and that ended that. So the call did not decide the game, but it had an impact. No, there's no doubt about it, and it's probably the most controversial finish, and it was definitely a memorable finish of the year.
The Owasso-Bixby regular season game, Battle of the Burbs, makes your list of best games. You called it a statement game, Barry. Talk about that one.
Yeah, because it was a statement, not because there was like an exciting ending, but it was a statement game. That the fact that going into the year, I think the general consensus was, it was certainly mine, and I think a lot of people felt that way, is that Bixby, Union, and Jenks were definitely the 3 biggest contenders for the 6A1 title. It seemed like they had quite the talent advantage over, and then Owasso, you couldn't discount them. I wasn't discounting them, but you thought there's definitely a separation between those 3 and Owasso. Well, and a lot of that had to do with, because Owasso was the one team with a question mark at quarterback, because Drew Frankenfield had never played varsity football before. But those questions were answered on the opening night. Quite a stunner. Owasso wins going away 40-21, and Drew had a great night, and that sort of set the tone for an outstanding sophomore season he had. And you look at hindsight, maybe it shouldn't have been as shocking because Bixby returned only 5 starters out of the 22 positions, and so it was going to take them a little time to get rolling and to play their best football. And Owasso took advantage of that, and they definitely made a statement. And for the course of the entire season, Owasso was the best team in 6A1. No doubt about it. They did not let up. I mean, there was only one sign of weakness, and that was in a crazy game at Norman North. when it was 64-54. But in Edmond Santa Fe, a 1-9 Edmond Santa Fe team almost upset wins at Owasso. How weird was that? But for the most part, Owasso's was just so good week in and week out. And they were still good in the championship game. It's just that Bixby showed why it's Bixby, a program that's won 10 state titles in the last 11 years.
So for our next games, we're gonna combo these a little bit, and we're gonna call them Muskogee's first two games. They were memorable because what?
Well, Muskogee, after they beat Booker T in the season opener, then the next 2 weeks they played teams from Arkansas, and they wound up winning those games due to heroics from Bird Ficklin, Muskogee's outstanding quarterback, who's signed with Utah. That his heroics led them to last-second wins over those teams and really set the tone for a great Muskogee season. That again, you talk about memorable games. That Muskogee rolled after that until the championship game where they lost an 18-point lead in the second half and Choctaw stuns them. But again, even in that game, what Bird Ficklin did early in the season, he did pretty much in the championship game after Choctaw erased the 18-point deficit. Bird Ficklin leads a great drive downfield and sets them up basically for the equivalent of an extra point kick, which is missed. I mean, it was very reminiscent. It would have been talked about like Cale Charbonneau, the drive he led 2 years ago in the 4A championship game. He got the ball about the same amount of time, 5 minutes to go, just leads them down the field, just beautifully done. But unlike Wagner, which made its kick, Muskogee missed the 21-yard field goal. So that was definitely a memorable game too. Bird Ficklin showing why he's potentially, I think he's got some star potential. He obviously had a great high school career.
Yeah, big fan of Jamarian Ficklin. Really want to see what he does at the next level. He's going to be fun to watch. All right, last on your list, Barry. Union, kind of the same thing in Muskogee. You thought two games for Union early in the season were highly meaningful. Explain.
Yes, Union. Well, they certainly sort of maybe set the tone for Union season. The first two games of the season that they go over to Bentonville, and they win in an overtime thriller. It was sort of surprise. You knew might be a difficult game, but wow, what a way to start the year with an overtime win. But then the next week they go to Stillwater, and they're down like 21-0, 28-0, something really. They're in a deep hole in the fourth quarter, and Shaker Rysick leads some incredible comeback. They get in overtime. They take the lead in overtime, but then Stillwater. It was much like, I guess, the ending. They go for two after they score in overtime, and they get it. Sort of like the ending for the Bixby-Owasso game in the championship. And Stillwater winds up beating Union 36-35. Never would have imagined. I mean, Stillwater's got a good program, good every year, but would never imagine going into the year that Union would lose to Stillwater. I mean, Union had some other issues going on at that time, but that was a bit alarming at that time from a Union standpoint. That was a bit of an alarming loss. But then they got back, and then they had the crazy game against Jenks the next week. So you've got like 3 games in a row to start the year where it was just Union had a very interesting non-district schedule, to say the least.
All right, let's leave it there for this week. Great stuff as always, Barry. Really fun to pick your brain on stuff like this. You can check us out every week. We'll be back next week. Merry Christmas, and we'll see you then.
Merry Christmas.